the mindset around pain. I think very commonly people fall into this mentality of no pain, no gain, and I've got to push my limits. And you can certainly get away with this for a while, but for the performance and strength-oriented people, this can be a big pitfall. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of sustainable strength that's a result of a targeted program that does not having me push my limits all the time. A good program will wave the loads up and down as well as the intensity and allow for adequate rest in between your more intense workouts. So it ends up being very strategic. In your program, this means that you are deliberately planning when you are pushing harder on a lift and when you're taking your foot off on the gas pedal a little bit more the following week. So I'm a much bigger fan of training for sustainable strength, which is the result of a very targeted program with your goals in mind, but it changes the intensity and the loads week in, week out to not burn you out while also allowing for proper recovery in between all your training days. Planning like this is for people who want to continue getting stronger throughout the rest of their lives with minimum downtime, as opposed to people that want to push up to a breaking point and then spend their time recovering from it once they've hopefully achieved their goals. So to speak more to the no pain, no gain mentality, I've been there and most people I know have been there at some point. And I get it. When you do that, you feel like you've overcome something or you've pushed past your limitations, and that can be a pretty rewarding feeling and a boost to your ego. But realistically, it's not sustainable, and down the road, eventually it's gonna lead to some kind of burnout or injury or both. So I challenge you to reframe this as working out hard as opposed to training strategically. Working out hard is cool and there's a time and a place for it, but if this is what we're doing all the time, it's going to lead us someplace we don't want to be. But when you're training, you're planning your lifts, you're scaling back when something doesn't go your way, and you're always leaving a little something extra in the tank for what's coming up the road or the next set. You're not pushing through pain because there's a long vision that incurring any kind of pain would be detrimental to. But that said, let's categorize some good pain versus some bad pain. So right off the bat, I'll tell you that there's no such thing as good pain. But for the sake of making a distinction between things we do want to experience and things we don't, let's say good pain and bad pain, and let's start categorizing things. So good pain can be the result of delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS. This is usually the result of loading your body or your muscles in a way that they're not used to and some kind of shock response to it that usually dissipates within 2-3 days. You can also do this if you're heavy loading negatives and really controlling the descent part of your lift. This will end up tearing a lot of muscle and you can end up with the same type of soreness that goes away in the same amount of time. When you're doing mobility work in a range that you're not really accustomed to, it can ramp up the discomfort pretty quickly. I always tell people not to go past a 7 out of 10, but just for argument's sake, this causes pain as well. So to make the most out of this discomfort or pain when you're doing mobility work, try to have it go up to the point of manageable discomfort and not mind-numbing pain that you just can't wait to get out of. Additionally, if you're doing your mobility work and stretching and you're going that far into your stretch, it's also teaching your body to try to shut the movement down, right? You're gonna gain mobility as you get your nervous system to kind of relax and ease into the stretch. Trying to go too far too soon is just gonna make your body want to close up. Okay, now bad pain. In most cases that I've seen, this is a result of overuse, not resting, pushing too hard, forcing a lift when you should not have forced it. Otherwise said, this is probably your ego getting in the driver's seat and starting to make decisions around weight, intensity, and reps. When you train like this and push a muscle group excessively, you can end up with a dull pain that kind of lasts in the muscle for a while, and it'll persist across several weeks, and if you're unlucky, several months. So compared to delayed onset muscle soreness, which will just last like 2 to 3 days or, at worst, maybe a week, when you've pushed too hard, that muscle, when you activate it, will just week in, week out, remind you that, hey, you've gone too hard, I don't like it, we're not working. So the other type of really bad pain that could occur is joint pain. So joint pain is usually the result of a faulty movement pattern, right? Somewhere you are loading up your lift and the movement is off a little bit and it's stressing the joint. There's a thing called the joint by joint theory, which kind of states that if you're feeling pain at a joint site, it's because of something that's happening above or below it. So the argument could be, hey, you know what? If your elbow hurts as a result of your weighted pull-ups, it's probably something that's going wrong up here at the next joint site. And this actually did happen to me. I was working weighted pull-ups for a long time and I had a goal that I wanted to reach, and I had my eye on the prize, and I was just moving up and up and up in weight and not really paying much mind to it. So there were warning signs that I should have taken the off ramp and maybe chilled out for a little bit, but I had to get my goal, right? The ego got in the driver's seat and I started just doing really heavy weighted pull-ups, and the end result was a lot of joint pain that would happen at the elbow. Now, really what was happening up here is that I was shrugging, and there were all types of compensations to get the weight that I wanted up and over the bar. I did get the weight, I did get the pull-up that I wanted, but the cost was really high. I mean, we're talking, it's been at least 3 months of recovery, and just now I'm about 90-95%. So that's why I really wanted to talk about this, because when you train smart, you know, there are warning signs that let you know, hey, maybe this is the time to take a break. You know, the pain is starting to ramp up and we need to chill out. I didn't listen because I had my eye on the prize, and it can be so tempting. You know, when you're so close to your goal, you think, man, you know, 10 more pounds and I've got it. I just got to train a little longer. But the truth is, my body had been talking to me and was telling me, hey, Mark, you know, this lift is taxing us a little too much. Maybe take some time off, maybe lighten up the load, maybe do something else. But stubbornly, you know, with the ego just kind of pushing me, I went for it. I got it, but it really wasn't worth the price of admission. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I can't say it enough. As much as I respect having a tough, I'm gonna endure and overcome mentality, it's not a good excuse or reason to not listen to your body when it starts giving you warning signs or when training isn't going the way that you feel like it should be. Whether it's good or bad pain, give your body the rest that it needs to recover from whatever you're putting it through. So an example, if you're experiencing DOMS, right? If your quads and your glutes are really sore after a heavy squat day, a lot of volume was there, don't go hitting squats the very next day, right? Don't go beating up your legs even more, because more is more. Give your body the rest it needs, because you're gonna get stronger and get the hypertrophy or muscle building you want when you're recovering. And if you're starting to get those dull aches or joint pains, take the off-ramp for a week or two. Do some mobility work, go for walks, do some gentle stretching. Things that'll put your body at ease and let you recover much faster from a level of accrued damage. As coaches, we know what to look out for because we've been trained for it. But more honestly, we've gone through these pitfalls, right? We've all pushed hard because our egos have gotten in the driver's seat. We've gone just a little too hard on a deadlift, just a little too far on the bench, and have all experienced downtime as a result of it. So the reason we talk about this stuff is to prevent you guys from making the same mistakes. But if I have a big call to action for all you guys out there, it's to ditch this more is more, no pain, no gain mentality, and to really start paying attention to your body when it starts talking to you.
Today we're going to explain the difference between flexibility and mobility. A lot of people think they're the same, but there are slight differences between them.
We're also going to talk about how this applies to your everyday life and what you need to move well.
A lot of people stretch and they wonder why, you know, they're still pretty much not flexible. But usually stretching is not always the answer. Usually it's a stability issue. So you could stretch all you want, but there's only so much you could do. What do you think about that?
I think it's true. And, you know, look, more to the point, I think modern lifestyles have you sitting at a desk and, you know, you end up with crossed in shoulders, a protruding neck, and tight hips, right? And there's only so much and so far that flexibility will take you. So as you do these very static stretches, it's great. You might feel a stretch, might provide some relief, but you won't have access to that range. So to explain the difference between flexibility and mobility, flexibility is what your body allows you to do, and mobility is what you have access to. And what I mean by that is mobility is something that you can actively move your way through, such as moving your arm overhead, as opposed to flexibility, which would be having some kind of external force on your arm, which your shoulder would allow to go this far back, right? I'm able to move my arm this much overhead, which means that I have the mobility and also the flexibility.
Yes. So to simplify it even more, just think of a rubber band. So a rubber band, think of a rubber band is stretched very far. So that is flexibility. Mobility, the rubber band is stretched very far, but you could move under control when it's very stretched. So that's just to simplify it. All right, so now we're gonna talk about how do we build mobility. The first one, train mobility like a skill. What do you think about that?
I think it's true.
Yeah.
So look, guys, the best way to gain mobility and to train your mobility is the same way that you do in the gym, right? You find your starting point, you find what your body's allowing you to do, and you work within that range. You don't push for too much too soon, but you actively engage your muscles in a range of motion that you currently have access to. And then over time, the threshold will increase.
Yep. So think of mobility as again, when you training it like a skill, think more of kind of reps as opposed to time. I mean, you can do time, but I like to think about it as in terms of reps.
Oh, and you know what? To speak to like our whole thing about minimum effective dosage, we're all about quality over quantity. So to speak to his point about time, you can spend a lot of time that is not quality. You're accruing a lot of quantity, but it's not quality. The quality of what you do in your range of motion will carry you much further than the time that he was talking.
Yeah, so the second one is going to be prioritize, control, range of motion. So that'll be something like cars. You guys have heard that. That's where you go in a controlled, slow manner. That's just an example. And you really reach, you really reach, you really reach. If you feel stuck, then you're going to stop.
Right, and then the CARS is short for controlled articulated rotations. So really, it's happening at the shoulder and at the hip, right? You're taking it, your ball and socket joints, through a full range of motion, or to Edie's point, as much as you can, to try to acquire more mobility over time as you perform the reps, quality reps.
Yeah, so the third one I like is loaded stretching. So that's simply just going into a position with some load. So that's like you having, I don't know, a dumbbell kettlebell, you're going down into a deep squat and you're just having it pull you down, and you just hold, you breathe for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you stand up.
Yeah, and another way to think about the loaded stretching is that you can use the weight as a counterbalance to help you pry deeper into whatever your position is, or you can use it as a weight that pushes you more into it.
The fourth one is integrate mobility into your warm-up. Short term, we just do dynamic warm-ups instead of static stretching, which, yeah, I mean, I prefer doing static stretching after your workouts, to be honest. So just implement a dynamic warm-up. An example of a dynamic warm-up is just the world's greatest stretch. The world's greatest stretch, the 90-90 hip rotations. That is an example. Shin boxes, yes. Shin boxes, yeah.
And to Edie's point about not doing the static stretching before your workouts, that can actually be detrimental to your workout, right? Holding whatever muscle it is in that stretched position for an extended period of time can actually decrease that muscle's performance before you work out. So another reason to not do that before you work out, but rather after.
And why is that? Because remember, I told you when you stretch, it sends a signal to your brain to kind of relax. And you don't want that, especially if you're going to lift heavy. So leave this static stretching till after your workout. So dynamic before, static after. All right. The fifth one of the favorites, breathing. Just simple breathing. You could go with box breathing, which is 4 second in, 4 second hold, 4 second out. You could do it crocodile style. So that's you on your
face down on the ground,
face down on your tummy. You could do it on your back with your legs bent. There's a number of ways you could do it. But just breathe. 2 minutes of breathing usually kind of opens you up.
So the other thing about breathing is that you can actually use that to help release and open up muscles more and more, especially if you can use your body's leverage against the muscle you want to relax. But an example, if you're doing a floor windshield wiper, you can extend one leg out to the side, and as you breathe with whatever the end range of motion currently is, and as you relax, that leg will drop lower and lower to the ground, eventually to end up touching it, because the breath work you're doing allows the muscle to relax and the weight of the leg opens it up more and more.
So the sixth one is be consistent and not aggressive. We've spoken about movement snacks. Movement snacks, just doing simple, every hour you do a couple, world's greatest stretches. Even in the morning when you wake up, I highly recommend in the morning, you do a couple of, you just put a nice little routine together, 2 to 5 minutes, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, what Edie's talking about, basically, if you have the luxury of being able to grease the groove on your mobility work throughout the day, over time, you're going to be amazed with how far you come. And to his point about movement snacks, so you do a stretch here, then a few hours later or an hour later, you do a stretch there. And as you accrue this over time, it's not going to feel like a lot of effort, but it will go very far and you'll acquire more range of motion.
Yeah, the more you do it, daily, I would say daily. I mean, again, you don't have to do it 3 times a day. I mean, at least once definitely. And I recommend you do that in the morning, start your day right. The less you'll have to do it in the gym. I mean, we don't want to waste too much time in the gym. Quick warm up, dynamic warm up, get to the weights to go home to do fun stuff.
All right, guys, so tonight we're going to talk about fatigue and how to distinguish between regular old muscle fatigue and systemic central nervous system fatigue, how to distinguish and how to listen to your body. All right, Edie, so what can you tell us about the difference between muscular fatigue after a good workout and systemic fatigue after a workout?
Muscle fatigue is simply muscle soreness. A good bicep day, you're going to feel your muscles. After a good leg day, when you can't get off the toilet, that is muscular fatigue. Systemic fatigue, that's nervous system centric. So if you do a heavy deadlift, you tend to just feel sore all over. You tend to feel tired when you wake up in the morning, and just stuff like that.
It takes more out of you.
Systemic fatigue takes more out of you. Yes.
All right. How would you pivot your training accordingly based on both these things? So, if you've got muscular fatigue, you hit a heavy squat day and you want to build muscle, but you're sore, how would you pivot there? And then how would you pivot if you're experiencing systemic fatigue as a result of, your whole body being fried?
Muscular fatigue, I always go with a gauge. So say 10 would be, I'm absolutely sore, 1 being no soreness. If you say a 5, I would say you're good to go. A good warm up, and then you head at it. You go at it. Anything from an 8, I would take an extra day. You won't not do anything. I would do more of a recovery walk or something like that. Get some blood circulation and stuff like that. But anything above 6, say anything above 7, I would get a recovery day in. Systemic, I would look at certain things like sleep. Certain things like stress, and adjust the weights you do in the gym. That's how I would adjust systemic fatigue.
You adjust the weights you do. Okay, so you'd be scaling the weights down.
That's one variable. It depends. That could be one, so you could decrease the volume, you could decrease weights. What would you do?
What would I do? What have I done?
What have you done?
Well, as a good segue into what we're going to talk about, what have I done? I've pushed. And, we're going to talk about this today, but the more is more approach to training, where I have to lift heavy weights. I got to get more reps in. I got to do all this stuff. In the past, I have done that. And then you pay the price because, as you point out, it'll start messing with your sleep. You'll feel fried. Your emotions will start getting messed with. You're going to see your numbers start sliding backwards. So that's what's been done. That's what a less wise Mark has done. But what would I do now?
Yeah, what would a wise Mark do?
I would probably scale the intensity back to probably about 50 or 60% of what I'm working on.
Yeah.
I would probably keep working the movement, but in a way that felt not taxing. And it's just like, hey, we're just revisiting the movement to make sure that we're still moving in this way, but we're not stressing ourselves the same way. So, for me, systemic fatigue, to the earlier point you made, has a lot to do with stress. We've hit a point of stress overload, and now we need to empty our cup a little bit to make room for more. And I think in terms of muscular fatigue, to your point of where are you on the soreness scale, I think there's a point where you can listen to your body. You know how sore you are. And I think the worst thing you can do if you're like an 8 or 9, 10 out of soreness is say, hey, you know what? We're going to squat again today. I got to get more volume in to make my muscles grow. That's a terrible approach because your muscles are trying to heal and you're just aggregating more damage. So guys, the big takeaway with what we're talking about is listening to your body, right? In both these scenarios. If your muscles are sore, listen to your body and gauge the soreness. Now, the more experienced you are working out, the more this will make sense to you and you can gauge how tired your muscles are. But if you're at that 7 or 8 area, right, you should probably not think about pummeling that muscle further because, again, the real magic is going to happen when you're resting and recovering and feeding and watering that muscle, not pummeling it further into oblivion. And as it pertains to systemic fatigue, right, that's a different type of total fatigue where the signs are going to be your stress levels, your hormones are going to feel out of whack, your emotions might be out of whack, your motivation will be low, your sleep will be disrupted, things that take you out of your normal functioning are going to become apparent. And the danger here is that if you keep pushing, as I have in the past, but if you keep pushing to the brink, then you're going to fall into overtraining, into a really overstimulated, overstressed state, which can take you weeks or months to come back from.
Yeah. So, I mean, a good way to gauge if you're overtraining, which will include systemic fatigue. If, like, say, 5 to 7 days in a row, you're just not feeling it, you're lethargic, you don't want to do anything. I mean, you know you slept 8 hours, but for whatever reason you wake up tired. That might be a sign that you're overtraining. So I would just evaluate. You could do a couple of things. You could evaluate your training, cut a couple sets down, decrease the intensity to about 60%, and do a lot more mobility stuff.
Yeah, the name of the game at that point is de-stressing, right? If you nothing happens in a straight line. You don't get stronger in a straight line. You don't build muscle in a straight line. So once you start hitting periods of high stress, whether you're feeling it locally at a muscle or, I guess systemically, you have to hit a recovery stride, right? So that you can come back stronger. Otherwise, you'll push, and then crash. Right?
Yep, there's going to be that big crash. Yeah, so just evaluate your training, evaluate your sleep, and just try to de-stress. Just do stuff that makes you happy. Go for a nice long walk, do stuff with your family, play with your kids. I mean, life will throw a lot of things at you, but at the end of the day, if you don't want to crash, we need to find ways to de-stress.